In 2018, LSU won 10 games for the first time since 2013. Now the Tigers have their sights set on the college football playoff. But can they get there? Find out here on the Gridiron Expert.
Yeah.
Ed Orgeron is entering year 4 at LSU, and expectations are high in Baton Rouge, as he has one of his best teams yet and one that can certainly compete for a spot in the college football playoff. The Tigers returned 8 starters on offense, a unit that scored an average of 32.4 points per game last year, their best mark since 2015. They returned their star quarterback in Joe Burrow, who made an immediate impact last year after transferring from Ohio State. He threw for over 2,800 yards, 16 touchdowns, and just 5 interceptions, adding 7 rushing touchdowns on top of that. He returns basically all of his wide receivers, including Justin Jefferson, Stephen Sullivan, and Derek Dillon. So the offense that was the handicap under the Les Miles era, one that could never really get going under Les Miles, is going to be very dominant in 2019, even better than the offense that they had in 2018. But defense, of course, is going to be the strength for LSU in 2019, much like it has been for previous years, many years in the past. But this one will be one of the best in the entire nation. And they are led by the three-headed monster in the secondary with Grant Delpit, Kristian Fulton, and the freshman Derek Stingley, who is absolutely the real deal. As a true freshman, he will come in and make an immediate impact with his LSU Tigers team and play phenomenal in the SEC West. This LSU team, absolutely the real deal, and like I said, one that could compete for the SEC West title and a chance at a college football playoff berth. They open up the season with what we're going to assume will be a victory over Georgia Southern. I know a couple of years ago LSU did fall to a Sun Belt team in Troy, but this year the expectations are higher. This is a better LSU team, and Georgia Southern is not Troy. And while their offense could be difficult to stop, I expect the LSU defense to take care of business in this one. They kick things off with a 1-0 start to the season before the big game, the one that everybody has circled on their calendars. Week 2, when the Tigers travel to Austin, take on Tom Herman and Texas. A Texas team that finished 2018 with a lot of momentum. Made the Big 12 championship game, of course fell to Oklahoma, but beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl 28-21. And of course that game was not as close as the score appeared. But Texas, the problem for them this season is going to be a lot of things, but first off, losing that much talent to the NFL last year. The Longhorns only returned 5 starters on offense and just 3 starters on defense. And while I do have a lot of faith in their offense, and Sam Ehlinger, and one of the best wide receivers in the entire Big 12, and Colin Johnson, it's their defense that will be their downfall in this game. The defense will not be able, in my opinion, to stop this LSU offense. In years past, you could have a mediocre defense and be able to stop an LSU offense that usually was not going to be able to put up as many numbers as they will be able to this season. Even though this game is on the road, LSU goes on the road and gets a huge non-conference victory. And if you want to draw comparisons to me, this game at Austin is the biggest game. It has an eerie, similar feel to that 2016 matchup in Austin when Texas beat number 10 Notre Dame. But for LSU, this game feels a lot like the season opener last year when they beat Miami, crushed Miami in Dallas. LSU returns to Texas, beats the Longhorns, and kicks off the season with a 3-0 start. And by this point, LSU, if they weren't already to kick off the season, is already in the top 5, and people will certainly be talking about them as college football playoff contenders. They beat Northwestern State before kicking off SEC play on the road against Vanderbilt, and this is a game that LSU cannot afford to overlook. They can't afford to overlook the Commodores because they bring back Keyshawn Vaughn, one of the best running backs in the entire SEC. Had a breakout season last year for the Commodores. Vanderbilt also coming off a bye coming into this game, an early bye week at that. They bring back a somewhat veteran quarterback in Riley Neal, who will be transferring from Ball State, and it's on the road. I'm not saying LSU will lose this game, but do not be surprised if this game is close for a while if you're an LSU fan, or maybe you'll be surprised if you're a Vanderbilt fan. I think the Commodores hang with LSU for a little bit, but the Tigers end up pulling away in this one, and they start off the season 4-0, get a bye week, come back home, beat Utah State. They're 5-0. And I put Utah State down as a surefire victory. And I don't mean to do that for a lot of teams, but I feel this LSU defense will be able to shut down Jordan Love. If the Aggies want to have any chance of beating the Tigers, they're going to have a phenomenal game, probably one of the best of his career out of Jordan Love, who is arguably one of the better quarterbacks in the entire nation. Not just Group of 5, but the entire nation. But with a week of rest, having already beaten Texas, I think the Tigers take easy care of the Aggies. And then they get into the bulk of SEC play. And they remain at home, facing off against Florida. The last 5 games between LSU and Florida have all been decided by just one possession. So we've had some instant classics between the Tigers and the Gators over about the past 5 years. I believe in 2013, the Tigers won 17-6 to end that streak of one-possession games. This Florida team, though, has won 2 of the past 3 against LSU, including a 27-19 victory last year in the slump. And that's what really showed that Florida was back, that Florida was ready to take that next step with Dan Mullen. And this Florida team has the potential to be even better than the team that they had last year, that 10-win team that beat LSU, that annihilated Michigan in the Peach Bowl. But this game is in Death Valley. And Florida has been losing a lot of players to the transfer portal. And while I do have a lot of faith in Dan Mullen, while I do have a lot of faith in Felipe Franks, while many people do not, and while their defense that returns about 8 starters and will have a very strong secondary, one of the better ones in the SEC, they do not have enough to come into Death Valley and get a win. I expect another one-possession game, but LSU is on the winning side of that one-possession game. Revenge from their loss in the swamp last year. LSU now 6-0 on the season, going into a road game against Mississippi State. Now, facing off against the Bulldogs, this is a major trap game to me. To me, it's majorly, actually, out of the entire schedule, as one of the biggest trap games on the schedule for LSU, sandwiched in between tough games against Florida and Auburn, going on the road to Mississippi State, a team that last time LSU visited Starkville lost by 30 points. Now, they took easy care of the Bulldogs last year, and now the Bulldogs are without their star quarterback in Nick Fitzgerald. Might be starting Tommy Stevens from Penn State. And it actually wouldn't surprise me with the history that he and Bulldogs head coach Joe Moorhead had at Penn State. So this game at Mississippi State, the cowbell's ringing, is a major trap game for LSU. But I actually expect Mississippi State to take a step back this year. They're not going to be as strong on the defensive side of the ball. They lost so much talent defensively to the NFL. A lot of that coming in the first and second rounds. LSU goes on the road and beats Mississippi State. They don't lose by 30 this time. They take care of the Bulldogs. They move on to 7-0. They come back home to face off against an Auburn team that has a lot of questions, in my opinion. An Auburn team that could be anywhere from 6-6 to maybe a 9 or 10 win team. That's how big of a margin this Auburn team has. That's how drastic and how good this Auburn team could be, or how bad they could be due to their such of a difficult schedule. Gus Malzahn returns to calling the plays for the Tigers. They have a question at the quarterback position. Will it be Joey Gatewood? Will it be Bo Nix? That defensive line, one of the best in the entire nation, no doubt. Could give this LSU offensive line some troubles, maybe put a little pressure on Joe Burrow, forcing him to win this game through the air if they take away that run game, which for Burrow would not be a problem whatsoever. Last year, LSU came in to Auburn at Jordan-Hare Stadium, won that game 22-21. Showed that LSU was back, that they were once again legitimate contenders in the SEC West. They win again over Auburn in Death Valley, defeating the Tigers here to move on to 8-0. This is an Auburn team, like I said, has too many questions to me offensively, especially going up against such a difficult LSU defense. They're not going to have enough to come on the road. As much as revenge would be nice for them, it's just not going to happen. Then they get their bye week, the big-time bye week, as they always get before their biggest showdown of the year, facing off against Alabama. This game will absolutely determine who wins the SEC West. This game, assuming that LSU takes care of business against Texas, will more than likely be a battle of the unbeatens on November 9th. Maybe reminiscent of that game of the century that we had all the way back in 2011. Very well could be the number 1 and number 2 teams in the country, maybe 2 and number 3. But this game against Alabama is on the road. Alabama has won 8 straight over the Tigers. I expect it to be 9 straight. In those 8 straight wins for Alabama, LSU has only averaged 9 points per game against the Crimson Tide. They were shut out last year by the Crimson Tide, 29-0 in Death Valley. And if this game was in Death Valley, you can bet your money that I would be picking LSU, because I think they are even better than they were in 2018. And I do expect this defense to give Tua Tagovailoa some issues. Absolutely. But this Alabama team, to me, in the SEC, is basically the equivalent of LSU. They match up stride for stride, but they own the offensive edge. And while LSU might own the secondary edge, Alabama owns the edge, in my opinion, in the front seven. They get a win at home, of course, coming off a bye themselves. LSU takes their first loss of the season and drop, of course, their 9th straight game to the Crimson Tide. They remain on the road against Ole Miss, and there is such a thing as the Alabama hangover. We've seen it from LSU. We've seen it from multiple other teams. Luckily for LSU, they're going up against Ole Miss the week after that Alabama game. And this is an Ole Miss team that could surprise some people in terms of how well they play. Maybe not bowl eligible, but they have Matt Luke as their head coach, Mike McIntyre as their defensive coordinator, and Rich Rodriguez as their offensive coordinator. So 2 former head coaches as their coordinators, both who did decent jobs at Arizona and Colorado respectively. But this Ole Miss team lost to LSU 45-16 last year. They only returned 3 starters on offense, have to break in a new quarterback like Auburn after losing Jordan Te'amu, have to replace their top 2 wide receivers in A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf. You get where I'm going with this. Ole Miss does not have the offensive edge to line up against this LSU defense. LSU might be a little hungover, might get a slow start, but does beat Ole Miss on the road. Their final 2 games against Arkansas and Texas A&M. Arkansas, the battle of the Golden Boot. Once again, when you come to a rivalry game, you just throw records out the window. They don't mean anything. And you saw that last year where Arkansas gave LSU a bit of a fight, only falling to the Tigers 24-17. And yes, that score may have been a little closer than the game actually was, but Arkansas did show some fight in that game. And I think they showed some fight early on in this one too. A Razorbacks team that I expect to be much improved in 2019. Second year under John Chavis' defense, bringing in some transfer quarterbacks, finally getting their second year under Chad Morris's new offense. But it is in Death Valley, and the Razorbacks do not have enough offensively, without a doubt, to go up against one of the best defenses in the entire nation. Arkansas falls, LSU wins, clinching another Golden Boot, holding on to that Golden Boot, I should add. And then Texas A&M to close out the year, last year's game, an absolute thriller. LSU losing 74-72 in 7 overtimes in College Station. And say what you want, that game could have been controversial, a couple of controversial calls here and there, but nonetheless, the Aggies escaped with the victory. And Jimbo Fisher building something in College Station, just will we see it in 2019 due to the difficult schedule. I love Kellen Mond at quarterback. I love the wide receivers he returns in 2019. To me, the defense, though, has a couple issues, has a couple questions. Maybe they've worked it out by the final week of the season, but not enough to come into Death Valley, more than likely at night, and beat the LSU Tigers. I think LSU gets their revenge, especially after that 7 overtime loss. Definitely going to be on their mind going into this one. They beat the Aggies in a revenge game, and the Tigers finished the season 11-1. A phenomenal season, a phenomenal job well done by Ed Orgeron. And anything less than this, especially anything less than 10 wins, would be a major disappointment with the amount of talent that LSU brings back in 2019. 11-1 is good enough to still be in the college football playoff discussion. While they more than likely will not win the West, assuming Alabama does go undefeated, what transpires in that SEC championship game between Alabama and more than likely Georgia could determine whether LSU slips in there, because they would have a quality loss against Alabama. So the hopes for the college football playoff are not dashed with that loss to the Crimson Tide. LSU, sitting at 11-1, guaranteed themselves a spot in the New Year's Six Bowl, assuming they can, of course, beat Texas, but will it be enough to potentially slip in to the college football playoff in year 4 of the Ed Orgeron era? So, guys, as always, thank you for watching us here on YouTube. Go check us out on Twitter and Instagram at Gridiron Expert. And especially, go visit our official website, thegridironexpert.com. Sign up for our newsletter and sign up for our expert picks. For just $30, you will receive every single one of our college football spread picks for the 2019 season, including the postseason. And I can promise you that is a deal and an opportunity you do not want to pass up. So join our team, sign up today only at thegridironexpert.com. And guys, as always, thank you for watching us here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. And we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.